Okay, so good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo, and this is Monday Live, something that we do every 3 o'clock Eastern every Monday. Our objective is to just help ourselves and the industry get through the pandemic, and also try and figure out what's on the other side of the pandemic for commercial buildings. If you're interested in the profiles of the panelists, go to mondaylive.org. Links to all our respective LinkedIns are all there. Just a reminder that views expressed here are personal and not of any company or organization. Please do post questions and comments on the Q&A and chat box on Zoom. And if possible, please complete the survey at the end so we get a little bit of feedback from you. Appreciate that. This slide deck is going to be, is actually already on mondaylive.org. So if you want to see any of the links that we provide, go over there. The agenda for today, chit chat about what's going on, news and trends. And then the main part of the show, we're going to be talking about digital transformation. Same format as we did last week. There are going to be 3 of us doing that this week, Anna Scholten, Tracy Markey, and myself. And then we'll have some time for additional questions, conversations beyond that. Some slides that the members have put together. I noted that moving companies is having problems satisfying the demands for moving. That was reminded to me by the fact that my son moved over the weekend. Ken is reminding us that the September issue is up online on education. I'm not sure that Ken's going to be with us today or not. Scott highlighting the Pinterest sort of huge story, and a couple of others have actually noting this as well. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. Mark also talking about Pinterest and talking about Yankees achieving wealth standards, so it'll be good to talk about that. John Pesci talking about Pinterest again, as well as some other things that he noticed. Anno, I think actually this is from last week, so I'm going to skip this. And that's all the slides that I have. So back to the group here. Anybody want to chime in about Pinterest? Who has the...
How about a quick summary of what it is? Some of us maybe didn't hear the whole story.
Yeah, it'd be good. Who wants to do that? Mark, Scott, or did you were the first slide, so you get it.
God, go ahead.
The only summary I was able to catch quickly was they terminated the agreement for a new proposed building in downtown San Francisco, almost 500,000 square feet. And instead, they're going to continue to remain in the 4 buildings that they're currently established in.
And they have to pay, they ended up paying like $90 million.
$90 million to terminate the agreement.
Wow.
You know, what's interesting is that the fact that they decided to not proceed, this follows what was the one REI a couple of weeks ago announced that they had built that new whole beautiful headquarters, and they said, nope, we're not going forward with that as well. I guess the question is this going to become a slight trend? Who knows?
I think the interesting thing I see is, it's not that they're not going to occupy office buildings. It's that they, in all these stories, a significant portion of employees are going to work from home forever, right? So it's not all or nothing, but these companies were planning on, large growth of their office space. But at the same time, in New York, we've seen some of the other companies grab up these deals on real estate, right? Because they needed space, Amazon and others going to New York. It's the refactoring, repurposing. I think that the thing that's going on is these, the companies that own and invest in and manage real estate, it's got to be hectic times there, especially without much direction. Who knows, which segment's going to win or lose, right? I spoke to a friend of mine who happens to be in that business, and I said, he says, I'm really busy. I said, give me 10 minutes, give me the rundown, right? And he says, okay, we'll do word association, retail, apocalypse. Right? Office buildings, nobody knows yet. I thought that was interesting. They haven't thrown in the towel. It's not clear enough. You can't see, you can't connect enough of the dots to have a firm feeling about what is going to happen on the other side.
I have to be in the back of my mind thinking that there's two sides, or there's two views of every situation. While there are some companies that are viewing this as the apocalypse, there are others looking at this like it's Christmas morning. Right? Because the real estate's going to be available and abundant and less expensive, right? So there will be certain companies, I'm sure, that will see this as an opportunity.
Well, and couple that with repurposing of facilities, right? Like malls into Amazon distribution places. I think people become creative as to new applications and what they're going to use them for as well.
Yeah,
John, just to pick up on your uncertainty, I know you guys think all I do is work, but I actually played golf yesterday and played golf with some guys who work for a Fortune 500 here in Richmond. I won't name the company, but their headquarters is here in Richmond, and they're all in the facilities group, which was timely for sure. And I started inquiring about their going back to work strategy. And that's what I got for an answer. I got really two things. One is their manufacturing has been up and running, continues to be up and running because it pays the bills. So they've found a way to get people to build the product. But from a office worker perspective, their main corporate headquarters is essentially empty. It has capacity for 600 employees and maybe 15 show up each day. That's it. And the other piece of uncertainty is they don't know how to go back. They literally don't know how to stay, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this, and now people can come back to work.
Yeah. Uncertainty.
There's no certainty around what you need to do and I started saying, and they were glad that I could send them some materials, but their awareness or lack of awareness of the things that we talk about each week in terms of how you filter the air, how you potentially detect COVID on surfaces, how you manage people's health, with surveys, any and all of those things was vaguely understood, and certainly there was no plan around it currently for them.
Yeah. I'm thinking about that. They don't know how to go back to work. And then I'm thinking about Tracy's two sides of the coin comment. So I'm thinking on one side of the coin, you've got these companies who, they're thinking, gosh, we can keep these people at home. Maybe there'll be some diminishment in our basic business KPIs, but we won't be able to really connect the dots. My question on the other side of the coin is, are people built for staying at home? And is that bloom going to be off the rose soon enough where people don't live like us on this call where they can go to any other room they want? People aren't necessarily built for working at home. So I wonder when that head's going to rear itself.
Yeah. I think we're starting to see that. I've been seeing more and more reports on, mental health issues and problems with family dynamics and things going on, that continues to increase. And there are just some things in the workspace that it's better if people are together or you need to physically be there. We're kind of in the split model now where we've got, production, shipping, receiving people at the office because you kind of need to be there to do that, right? Everybody else is still working remotely, but there's a bit of a split. And Steve, it's funny they mentioned I too went golfing for the first time since last calendar year, on Friday morning, and it was weird to me. Kind of felt like being outside the bubble a little bit, but life does go on. That's a perfect example of that. The course was full, people were out playing.
Oh yeah.
There's lots of activity for sure. Had to wear your mask in and out of the clubhouse, that kind of stuff, but that was about it.
And NASCAR this weekend ran in Daytona, and they had fans in the stands.
Mm.
So maybe we're starting to see a little bit of comeback. But I think, you know, we're all asked the same type of questions day in and day out. I think, in my opinion, I think we're kind of just traveling through like it is right now through the end of this year, and beginning next year. I think that's going to cause the time, a new beginning, you know, call it whatever you want, that you will start to see some more sense of folks back in the offices and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Sorry.
there's one, sorry, I just kind of building on what Mark was saying. One of the things that I've been thinking about too is just kind of looking at my own mentality and how this is unfolding. And I think for a long time, I was sort of in this waiting state of mind, waiting, when are things going to kind of get back, and waiting and waiting. And then there was some innovation or necessity going on that was, okay, how do we prepare for when things start to get normal again? And so all of my thinking was around, again, the idea that things are kind of going to go back to the way they were. And now a lot of the examples that we're hearing here, and I think what more and more people are thinking like is, let's not worry about that. Let's just deal with the situation today and innovate on our business model, or innovate on how we're going to work better together, or whatever it might be. So I think companies are getting past that sort of wait and see mode. And I don't know, real estate, you know, John started it with, or Scott, whoever it was, with they're waiting to see, they just don't know. And I think reality of this is going to be here for a while is setting in with certain industries, and they're just moving forward. They're innovating and changing and adapting.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing, Tracy.
Feel that? Am I the only one that kind of went through that cycle, or?
No, we went through the same thing. We're starting to see people really saying, okay, now that it is what it is, as bad as that statement is, but how do we deal with it? What do we do? How do we move forward? There are things we can do. You know, let's get started on that. Even if it's some of it is in preparation, you know, so a lot of people we're talking to are doing it as preparation steps, like, okay, here's ideas, here's thoughts. We're having a lot more discussions and conferences with our channel guys and customer guys saying, okay, here's a way of doing it, here's a way of doing it. People are becoming creative and are wanting to move forward. I think you're right. I think we've got past it's, you know, we went through multiple stages, right? First of all was back in March, it was like, it's only going to be a couple of months. Don't panic. And then we went, oh crap, this is going to take longer than we think it's going to be. Oh, now it's summer. And now we're getting back into there's possibly a light at the end of the tunnel. So let's start getting ready.
I think testing strategy, we have to overlay on this conversation. People don't know yet because the testing. I mean, my kids are actually in Yosemite this weekend, that they checked it out. I don't know exactly where, but they both got tested before this group of four, a pod would, and they just was like normal. Yeah, you know, like, we're going to do this. It's better than going, you know, we're still going to be outside because it's there, but we're just going to check it out. We'll all get tested. And my daughter's in college. It's cheap. Like, I looked at my plan, like, if I don't have a doctor's order to get tested, it's $120. And I probably could go to a Quest and get tested. I don't feel like I need to right now. Then you make the decision. Do I need to get tested right now? They got to figure out the testing thing, or the community testing. I mean, I'm more hopeful for quick, fast testing than I am for vaccine and people taking vaccine.
And I got a real case for that, Teresa. Just a couple of weeks ago, my second son is a research scientist at USC, runs a lab at USC, and they just were allowed to go back 4 weeks ago. And within 2 weeks, one of his lab assistants that he employs, she was tested positive. You know, and because they were running a good contact system at USC, they were able to track down all the people that she was in contact with, including my son. So they went into self-isolation, and they took USC provided the test, and the results came back the next day. You know, he was clear and he was fine and everything
Yeah,
else. And,
yeah.
and this is just a process right now, you know.
Yeah, they just announced Abbott Labs, you know, the $5 15-minute test that Abbott's going to start shipping soon. And if that's really as ubiquitous as they are making it sound, that would be a game changer.
Is that the one that you do at home yourself?
Is
There's
that
there's talk about somebody is trying to
Point of care, I think it's the
get one at home, you know, ship it and you do it yourself, almost, you know, like a pregnancy test, I guess, similar to
No, I think
the concept.
I believe that's quite a way down the road. The Abbott's thing is a point of care, so you could have it in a CVS or a urgent care kind of thing.
Yeah, there is. It's kind of interesting. We have a customer in Hong Kong, and they shut down early, way back when, and then opened kind of back up. And then 6 or 8 weeks ago, they shut down again because they were getting 100 cases per day. And, you know, for a long time, and still to this day, that's, you know, from 10 to 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning in Arizona. But they shut the whole place down, the whole city down. And in our meeting today, they're taking a different strategy. And I come back to what Therese was saying about they. As soon as they figure this out, or they understand, you know, who is they is what popped into my head. And in the case of Hong Kong, they is their government, and they have shut everything down, and they're doing 100% testing of everybody first to establish a baseline free of charge. No one's paying for this. And then they'll restart the contact tracing and so forth from there. So, you know, the they was government leadership and just did it, you know, everybody, no exclusions. And I think that has a lot of merit to it, if you think about kind of our evolving situation here.
But the Hong Kong is highly dense population, so for them to do it right away makes more sense than suburban population in US, which is
it'll be much more, sure, but some resemblance of that, you know, we could probably pull that off, but it's been
I guess I'm watching kind of the broader societal behaviors, including going back to school and, you know, elections coming up and various other sports is a big deal. Those are kind of things that will actually influence our behavior. It'll be interesting to see how that would all change our behaviors by the time we get to the end of the year. So I suggest we move on to our main part of the show, as it were. Starting last week, we have basically wanting to have a conversation about digital transformation. And we basically have 3 questions that we're basically asking ourselves. 4 of us spoke last week, and 3 of us are going to speak this week. And we may or may not continue with this on the next show after Labor Day. But the 3 questions about digital transformation: when did you first come across it? Your experiences through your career, and then the last question is how COVID impacts buildings' digital transformation. And first to go today is Anno Scholten. So do you want you have a couple of slides? You want them up now, Anno?
Yeah, just throw them up. First
okay.
one.
So you got 5 minutes starting now.
Fine now. So most of you may know, may not know, I'm actually originally Australian, and this is my first exposure to digital transformation. This is a project in Canberra, Australia. For those of you who don't know, it's the capital of Australia. This is called the New Parliament House. The date was 1985, so it goes back a ways. This was the first billion-dollar building actually built in the Southern Hemisphere at that time. This is actually Parliament House. You can see the houses of reps and senates on either side of that. Honeywell, I was working for Honeywell at the time. That's where I started my career directly out of college. And I was actually the project manager on this particular project. It was the first, it was a $25 million contract for Honeywell back in '85. But we did everything. We did the controls, the HVAC, the CCTV, the security, access control, intrusion detection. lighting, everything else. That building was originally sold as a pneumatic project. So it had some 1,500 pneumatic VAV boxes. And when I started there as the project manager, we actually was the first time we converted that to DDC. And that was Honeywell Xl1000s, for those people who remember the Honeywell XL systems. That was the first generation Honeywell. We were pretty brave putting that into this brand new building coming out of the ground. And we also, this is the building that Honeywell, we built a whole new front server for this thing. It was a mini computer-based technology in those days, where we ended up integrating everything. We ended up integrating the XL1000s, we integrated the security, the CCTV, the lighting. And for those of you who don't know, that technology actually became Honeywell EBI system, which they sell still today. It was built on this project, and this is the project this is, as you can see, that's actually a green roof. That was the first green roof concept. You can actually walk across the grass on top of that particular building.
3 minutes. I don't think you can see my thing.
No. And so this is kind of my first introduction to what I'd call digital transformation. We thought we were we were well beyond 2000 back in those days. Next slide. Things have changed dramatically since, of course. What we do now and what we get involved with, what's happening in the APAC region is significant. They now move to what they call digital districts. These are digital smart estates. This is where they, you can see here 50 hectares of land. This is actually in Singapore. It's called the Punggol Digital District, where they build the whole infrastructure, everything, housing, residential, commercial, teaching, universities, everything is all built from the ground up. They literally build these things. These are multiple. We're involved in several of these. And you can see, if you go to the next slide, Anton, the breadth of what they talk about from digital deployments and digital transformations is huge. I mean, they go from operations back end all the way up to, user experiences and stuff. And in their models, everything is encompassed into their digital transformation. Just to give you some ideas of some architectures, these are common that we come across today. They talk about these open standard middleware platforms. Everything is thrown at this one. You can do the next one, Anto. Another example, another project, similar idea that they call this the cities of the future. These are not dreams or anything. These are projects that they're working on today and working on implementing today. And the technology integration that they do is just significant, especially from a smart estates perspective. And next slide, Anto. And they even go down to this sort of level. They actually map out expected visitor journeys, or the next one, Anto, expected employee journeys. They actually say, what is the experience of a person walking through and going through, living in these environments? What do they need? What is the technology that they need? How does it integrate? How do the experiences cross compile? So this is sort of where digital technologies are with today. And then the last one, you asked us, we actually did an analysis of what we called pre and post COVID impact. And this is kind of our high level chart. You guys can share this later. We kind of did what was the impact of, where was the focus of attention pre-COVID, and what's the focus of attention post-COVID? And this is kind of our take on how we see the transition from pre to post.
That's interesting.
Did I do 5?
Yeah, you're perfect. You've got 5 seconds left, so we should. There you go.
Thank you.
On to questions. Is that system in Canberra still working?
It is very much still working. In fact, Honeywell has a significant maintenance contract, a yearly maintenance contract on that thing that still is running today. It's actually been upgraded to the EBI. Fun fact, the only digital thing that we actually didn't do, the New Parliament House Construction Authority, they actually approached us to ask us if we could do the monitoring of the beer reticulation system through that building. So as you can imagine, every one of those houses have their senators and their reps, and everyone has their office, and they actually reticulate beer to every office because it's Australia, right? And of course, the way they wanted to monetize that was they wanted us to do flow meters and monitor the beer consumption on the different brands and produce the necessary invoices.
That would be telling. Hey,
yes.
Would you say that Australia or the Pac Rim area, are they ahead of what we're doing here in the States, behind, and running in sync, or?
I'd say it's different is the answer, Tracy, is that they're running down this whole concept of digital districts, smart estates. They're looking at this from we are building everything from the start, industrial, commercial, and in the process of doing that, we're integrating the whole life experience. So this whole user journeys and how people live and stuff. It's the technology is not a lot different to what we do here. They just have a bigger vision on how it impacts people who use the technology.
Something that you said there, kind of digging in a little bit more, but they have a vision. So they start with a vision and it's intentional. I always feel like a lot of stuff that happens in the state is very reactionary and at best evolutionary and not proactive or intentional. Is that a noted mentality difference, or?
It is a mentality difference. Having said that, 90% of the technology going into those estates is US technology. They just have a better idea of how to bring it together.
Mm. So transformation isn't just about the technology, though, is it? It's about
correct. How do you use it and what's the benefit?
Steve?
So Anna, Carol asks a good question. Are these customers seeing any actual payoffs from going digital?
I got to tell you, the fascinating experience I've had, public transport in Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan is just phenomenal, right? I mean, the experience these days, everything is on an app, right? So, if you need to go from A to B, you type in A to B, there's an app from the government. You type in A to B, it tells you exactly which bus to take, where to go, when to leave home, when the bus is actually turning up. I don't even have to know anymore, right? When to get off, when how to travel from here to there. The payoff is more about life experience than anything else, right? It is just the life experience changes is amazing from what they do. So when you talk about payoff, I think there is efficiency gained by that. So, they're getting fundamental, because people use the app now to track all this. They now know which bus routes are more popular, which they never had before, right? They didn't know how many buses needed to go where people are going. The information that they're pulling from that is now helping efficiency significantly.
So that's interesting. So you're saying, if you don't mind saying, it's like the customer experience is where the payoff, but it sounds like that customer experience is feeding also right into increased revenue.
Yeah, from an efficiencies perspective, both energy operations. Yeah,
but that's not a million miles away from like Amazon, right? You get value out of using Amazon, but Amazon knows a lot more about how to service us. So that's maybe a sort of a hallmark of digital transformation.
Mm.
Yep.
I know we're almost up out of time, but you always count on me for the Silicon Valley view on this. And of course, what you're saying about transportation and APAC is interesting. And what I hear is going to happen here is, whether it's Google or it's Uber, but they're pitching their services to cities, that you will get the Uber app that will tell you, is it faster to call the Uber or to take the public transportation? And slowly, I think it is Uber that expects that, that platform that everybody will count on will not be public, but will be private and run by Uber. City by city, so they can take you to that last mile. Do you want to find your Uber bike? Because they've gotten into the bikes too. Will you get there? The app will tell you, will you get there faster on the metro, with a scooter, calling a limousine? But it will be the Uber app. It won't be the City of New York app.
Right.
It's an uncomfortable future, but sounds like that is being pitched as we speak.
Any closing comments, Anna? since we're at
to your point, Therese, Google's moving down the same path, right? They are doing, because my daughter works in this space, they are doing a lot of work with what's called the influencer market. How do you get the influencer market to push better, simpler, easier apps to get around? So they're a big push in that area right now.
Yeah, yeah, and they are.
Okay. Thank you, Arno. Now it's my turn. So Tracy is going to be the clock master. So shall I start?
Go ahead. I'm ready.
Okay. Thank you. So my technology journey started with audio. I used to build amplifiers and speakers and mixers. I used to run the high school radio show every lunchtime kind of thing. And audio is interesting because audio is the ultimate sort of analog, right? Because in audio system, you have a microphone, which is essentially a sensor that converts the vibrations into sound, that goes through preamps, that goes through transmission, wireless or otherwise, and it goes to a big power amp, and it goes to the speaker, right? And the whole thing about audio is that the speaker vibration is supposed to mimic the vibration of the microphone. That's the word analog. That's where it comes in. That was where it comes from. So my first encounter of digital was at college in Southampton in 1975, when a professor taught us about the flip-flop, the humble flip-flop. A flip-flop, if you don't know, is basically two transistors wired up in a way so that it remembers a state, right? So you flip it to 1 and then you flip it back to 0 later on, but it remembers the state. And that blew my mind, because from an analog world to a flip-flop world, it's just like, how can it remember stuff, right? So I remember that day. I remember the lecture room. I remember the professor. I remember looking out the window at the building across the way. It's kind of, sort of quite an important moment in my life. And from there, I created basically a digital disco lights systems, believe it or not, because I was kind of in the audio thing. So I didn't want to go down the audio, switched over to lights. And then later on, I got into microfilm, doing digital microfilm management, which is again the same. Digital microfilm is essentially analog. And then in late 80s, a business colleague of mine showed me this metal desk that ended up to be an Andover control system, right? And he said, can you connect that to that thing over there, which is a trend control system? And I said, sure, I can. So I did. And out of that came the product called the CDC Engine, which is the first ever integration platform. Back in, it was released in 1990. And it was used in the UK and in Europe. And from there, I developed other products that then got acquired by what is now Schneider Electric in the US. I spent 10 years obviously talking about digital transformation at conferences, at BillCon and others. And now I'm focusing on creating PADI, which is essentially doing the same thing in the internet era. And so, what I was trying to think about in the last couple of days is that, having gone through all of this, what fundamentally is digital transformation, right? And I've been observing the discussion that a few people have been having in the industry about trying to compare the iPhone with the building automation system. iPhone is very simple to use, and John, you sort of, one of the persons is saying that's kind of silly because building automation system is ultimately very complex, right? So what really sort of occurred to me is that digital transformation, a lot of digital transformation is really about organizing things, about organizing the components, right? So what Apple actually did was they organized all of the vendors and all of the technologies to go, all the complexities to go into that little box, right? They did the same with the software, with the cloud, with the services, phone services and everything else, right? Into those sort of components that kind of connect together. They organized all of that so that it makes it easy for a consumer then to consume it. They don't have to worry about that complexity. So as I'm sort of thinking through how the catalyst that is known as COVID is sort of changing this, I'm kind of thinking that really what we need is for ourselves to be organized, so that we can actually think about all the complexities that we all know and love, right? And try and sort of find out a way how we can sort of organize them in a way so that an ultimate user can then just sort of use it without being exposed to those complexities, but obviously exposed to the benefits thereof. So that to me is kind of a digital transformation, and I think that's a huge opportunity that's open to us in this industry. I think I did good on time.
What about the COVID impact?
I think I see the COVID impact as a catalyst, right? I mean, that to me is, we've already talked earlier about, you know, how it's changing real estate and everything else. So I sort of, because I tend to sort of think sort of the high levels of abstractions, I don't tend to focus about on the sort of the health sort of issues that we all do, but I think it's a significant catalyst for change, and I think that's what I'm trying to tap into.
I thought for sure you were going to go into the analog versus digital battle in audio that went on for a long time, or still going on, some would argue.
Yeah, that's kind of, I decided in the 70s that I didn't want to go the audio route. I wanted to do the 2 digital with lights, but there you go.
Anto, it seems like successes such as the iPhone have been built around a company with significant financial means and, let's say, a strong brand that could, through its strengths, attract companies to its platform or system. Here in the building automation space, there are some big companies with a lot of strengths, but they seem, with perhaps a couple of exceptions, to want to go it alone, to be vertically oriented. So why do you think that might change so that we can take advantage of all the strengths of the various companies to provide better services to the consumers?
Maybe what I missed out mentioning in my comments is that maybe the Android phone is a slightly better sort of comparison because it's much more open. Obviously, one of the problems with Apple is that it's a walled garden. That's kind of that's their strategy. But something like Android is actually a lot more open. So you don't have that extremely strong sort of influence of somebody that wants to keep everything sort of contained, right? But it is a collaborative effort. And one of the interesting things that I'm seeing going through the COVID sort of era in the last few months is that there are quite a number of initiatives, or quite a number of collaboration and discussions that's going on, right? So to me, that's kind of suggesting that there is sort of a need or a pent-up sort of appreciation that some organization is necessary to actually change it. So I don't think a big brand will necessarily do that, but I think there's a lot of grassroots kind of forces that could make it happen. But it's really down to all of us in a way.
It reminds me, Anto, how I pointed out to you that documentary on General Magic.
Mm-hmm. General Magic.
It was. Has anybody else seen that documentary about General Magic? No, you got to watch it.
What service?
Well, there's a device called, back in the 80s, there's a device called General Magic, and it's basically the first PDA that was produced. It was produced by some people came out of Apple.
Mostly, the Mac team.
Fidel was part of that. And it created something really great, but it was way too early, right? So it failed. I actually have one. I still have one in the closet here. One of only like 8,000 that people actually bought. Some stupid small number like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was Mark Perot. He's sitting there against the crashing waves. They had all the team from the Mac. They knew what they wanted. And if you see their early drawings, it is like, so Steve Jobs came out with the Mac in 2007. This is probably 1999 or something. But yeah, General Magic 2000, 1999. They had all the components, they had the drawings, but the timing wasn't right and it all fell apart. But the point of the documentary is everything rolled from there. It was Tony Fadell who invented Nest was there. It was Andy who invented Android. It was the guy that started eBay. It was the guy, the Silicon Valley roll that came out of this General Magic. Well, you know, so it's like the guy, Mark Perot, who's like, I don't know if he's a VC.
Very incestuous kind of.
Yes, the waves rolling in and out. And he said, how can you define failure? You know, like technology is like this ocean going back and forth. There's no failure, you know, like General Magic was like an astounding failure financially. And all the people that put money in it felt totally burnt. But look what it really did give birth to the iPhone. But it was only, to Jim Butler's point, it was only Steve Jobs when he was reinventing himself. And they had all taken they were all Apple people anyway, but they were Macintosh people. And they were glad that it was Steve Jobs that finally got to stand up with the iPhone and said, this is it. But
which, by the way,
you know, I made the joke whenever it was, like, we're a herd of one-trick ponies. To Bill Bain's comment, you know, like, yeah, bad company, that's trying to be a tree, and this is everybody wants to be the open integration platform. It's like a herd of one-trick ponies. That's all we want to do. Everybody wants to do it. Has anybody done it? Maybe. But anyway, I just think about Mark Perot and the holding, like, did I fail? I don't know. I lost a lot of money, but look at everything that rolled out of it. Anyway. Any
other questions or comments?
Do you still have the lighting computer?
I do. I have the early prototype. I'm scared to plug it in because it may just go poof because it's been in closets all this time, but I still have one.
So your next thing you're going to do in business is open up a little museum at your house and charge admission for all the early technology that's come and gone, right?
Yeah.
That'd probably go over well in Nashville, actually.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, there's the Moog Museum here, actually.
Oh
wow.
Interesting.
Bob Moog was actually established the business here many moons ago.
That's a digital transformation, if ever there was one.
On the audio side.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I always think we should storm the Computer History Museum over here in Mountain View.
Yeah, that's awesome, that one. I love that one.
I love that one, but I think I sent John Petzier a few when I went there a few years ago, took pictures of like PLCs, like where the split happened between OT and IT is, you know, right here. It was like a girl with a go-go boot or something standing on a computer that was a PLC, Programmable Logical Controller. And I think that's the only thing in that museum. That's where it ended for them, where operational technology. And I think they need to start a new wing.
I'm just scared of that museum because I have a lot of that stuff that was in that museum.
It's a fun museum.
I think that we're over our time, right, Tracy?
Yeah. I stopped at the 5, but
right.
The first 5. Sorry.
It's okay. So moving on, Tracy, you're up.
Okay, so first date with VT. You know, when you first put that out there, the very first thing that came to my mind was the first time I saw email, as I was standing in the computer center in University of Maine with my deck of punch cards for my programming class, and one of the guys said, "Hey, look, I'm getting these messages from Stanford University." And I thought it was all a big joke, and he would send a question and the guy would ask, and I said, you know, I tried to trick him, but it worked, and I didn't believe it at first. That was the very first thing. So mail to email was really the very first one. But over time, there's been these series of memories that I have. You know, when I first worked as an intern in a paper mill and swapping out pneumatic systems for digital controls of various kinds. That was really my first practical experience, and seeing, you know, kind of digital controls in practice. But then after graduating, I spent quite a bit of time in the aerospace industry. And I'll never forget the first time one of the Boeing senior engineers on the 777 told me the story that it was designed to be able to be flown by one pilot and one dog. And I didn't understand what that said. And the whole thing was, well, the pilot is there to feed the dog, and the dog is there to bite the pilot if he tries to do anything. So, and that's when the reality of planes flying themselves really sank in for me, even though they'd been doing it for quite some time. So, if you fast forward this, more memorable here in the 2010, 2009 timeframe, I remember a group of us standing, it was about 1:30 in the morning in Chicago in the wintertime, outside in a parking lot of a McDonald's, and being on the phone and somebody giving the command to turn on the parking lot lights. And the guy we were talking to was in Florida. And, he flipped the bit, so to speak, and the parking lots lights in Chicago went on, and we're standing out there freezing our tails off at 1:30, cheering and jumping, and how cool it was to turn the parking lot lights on from Florida. So there's been these kind of series of memories over the years in the different ways that it's impacting. And now, I think the more recent one was when we hit our number 1,000 store that we were monitoring, right, on a platform, and being able to get onto a screen or on your phone and look at 1,000 different locations literally, and understand temperatures or light status or make set point changes or schedule changes or whatever. Just if you look back at the evolution of that is amazing. So all of my experience has kind of been up through controls from that point forward. It's interesting. I see all of this as a bit of a pendulum swing to be likened to centralized control versus distributed control. Throughout my years being an engineer and running a business, I've seen this kind of back and forth between central control, distributed control, central control, distributed control. And the parallel, followed between OT and IT, we were talking about there a minute ago. And I think that still is going on to a great degree. And we're, kind of pendulum swing back to the cloud as a form of centralized control on this whole thing. And it's been kind of interesting to watch that go back and forth. As far as the impact that COVID has, the first thing I think that we need to note is that there's this perfect storm of low-cost electronics, semiconductors, combined with ubiquitous connectivity through cellular networks. And then you kind of layer on top of that the app generation, what I'd call the app generation, the general acceptance of remote connectivity and control. And then you tie that back to, this is really a generational thing. I have my grandkids here doing the virtual learning, and I'm thinking, if they can do that now and they understand phones, and I had to go through like 3 laptops with my grandson a moment ago because 2 of them were crashing on him. He wasn't shaken at all by that, and it was just like, okay, that's life, that's the way it is. This is going to be interesting. And I think COVID has really become the killer app we were talking about the other day, no pun intended at all. But it really is an accelerator of all of this and an amplifier of this digital transformation into what the future is going to be like. And we're seeing it unfold at light speed right in front of us, right in the last 6 months. So I'll quit there. I'm out of time.
So out of interest, Tracy, on all those cycles, steps that you talk through your life with each changing technology, did you notice how many people you were displacing from a job at that time, or?
No idea. The pilot one was the one that hit home at first, right? And it was interesting, even when I worked in the paper mill in the early 80s as a college student, I worked there in the summers. I worked in the instrumentation department, they called it. And I did detect that some of the older guys were a little cranky and nervous and not liking all of this new digital kind of looking stuff. And even, you know, they had some 4 to 20 loops and things going on already, but, and I didn't fully understand it until later when some of that started coming to light, that they were worried about their jobs. Right. And not so much that they'd need less of them, but they just weren't able to kind of adapt and keep up.
So
Yeah,
here,
I'm sorry.
in 2020, you know, we're all basically automation specialists on this call and so forth. Do any of us wonder about the good we're doing, even though we may be displacing people? Is anybody concerned about job loss?
I kind of find myself going back and forth here on this. So to me, it's a net zero gain kind of a game, right? You lose jobs here, you gain jobs here, you lose skills there, you gain skills over here. But even earlier when we were all talking, I was thinking about really what's the important part of all of this transformation is the data and the ability to understand. You know, we were talking about Amazon and that part of it, but we have some new applications going where we're monitoring different pieces of equipment, and the amount of information that we're able to gain from monitoring all of that and having that data is accelerating the evolution in the efficiency cycle, right? There's a learning curve to every new technology or every new piece of equipment or whatever, and it is just making that so much faster. And 2 or 3 of the things that we're involved with have to do with the pandemic, either directly or just, you know, 1 degree of separation, let's say. And because we're able to collect all this data for the companies producing this equipment, it's going to allow them to innovate faster and adapt faster and evolve faster, right? So there's a great good to the general well-being of the human race, so to speak, that comes from that, even if there might be impacts that are negative in other ways, I think.
Cool.
Carol says, no people have to be able to retool themselves, gain new knowledge, career, self equals learner. So I think, you know, I kind of concur with what you just said, is that all of a sudden we didn't rely on data like we do today and where we're going with it. So you need people, there's got to be people who can understand, interpret that data. So that's one example of new opportunities for people that in case they might have been displaced or whatnot, as I see it. And I'm sure there's others, many others.
And we're also in a position of creating new things to do. I happen to be rereading Brave New World, and it's sort of reminding me of that kind of thing. Because a lot of the things that we have now, you know, how complex a car is and how many people is actually involved in actually creating things. So there are other things that people do. It's basically what we're saying here. New things need to be done.
Well, and to Carol's point, I am absolutely afraid for my grandkids if they do not keep up with what's going on. At the same time, I'm freaked out by how much more they understand and just accept from a digital standpoint. Then, you know, I consider myself kind of on the forefront of technology and what's going on. And then I get into certain discussions with the grandkids and I feel stupid about it. I don't know what's going on at all. But there is such a change coming to our society. If you just look at the auto industry and how that is going to change over the next several decades, and what that does even to the infrastructure and the business models, and their mechanics are not going to look like mechanics anymore. You know, it's all computer related stuff. The service centers and the dealerships, you know, without the service, the dealerships are going to die. They make most of their revenue from doing service. So it's really interesting. I had a really in-depth discussion with a pretty senior guy at Volkswagen, and he was a soccer dad, and their view of the future at Volkswagen is both exciting for me as a technologist, but scary for the potential impact on society and how even just in that industry, it's going to change society so much.
But you talked about it earlier, right, Tracy? I think the difference is back in our day, you know, the amount of technology was bound and we were all consumed with how it worked. I mean, you know, I wanted to get in underneath the hood of the car and look and see how it worked and fixed it myself. Like your grandkids, you know, when the computer stopped working in my day, I'd spend time to make it understand how it worked to fix it. They're like, give me a new one, right? Let's move. I don't need to understand how it works anymore. I just need to use it.
Yeah.
And that's a higher level. It may sound in the old days, and oh well, no, you don't have the same work ethic. That's a higher level way of thinking in some ways, and frankly, I mean, we're probably not far off from a post-work world.
Well, don't forget the need for care. I mean, there's going to be more humans, there's going to be more older humans, and there's like the care industry and everything, and this technology and supporting infrastructure for that is going to be keeping a lot of people very busy.
Yeah, if you ever have an opportunity to talk with anyone who's kind of in the early research on the medical side of things, it's just phenomenal what they're doing. It's too bad that none of us are really kind of directly involved with some of that, but it's really.
Listen, Tracy, if I'm hearing if you could hold on another 40 years, you're going to live forever.
I keep telling everyone I want to live for another 50 years because I want to see what the hell happens in this world.
Yeah.
It's accelerating so fast. It's just
exciting.
incredible. Just
but is our industry accelerating that fast? I mean,
yeah,
I think that's as I watch all of the digital transformation stories, the thing I find most interesting is what are the real time constants? We talked about the time constants for the devices and consumer, and we know the dynamic there. But we know that in our field, that the adoption of direct digital technology into buildings, 40 years later, we're 20% into the market. So what makes something compelling in our industry? What makes that digital transformation compelling?
I think that's one of the things that we're saying, that it could be this time right now, this problem that real estate, there is no more business as usual. And right. It could be COVID as this accelerant. At least I've heard that several times in the course of the call.
It could also be that customer experience where, okay, if we can now wow the customer, we'll actually get them to come back to our buildings.
But I actually want to come back to something Jim Butler said about who is it going to be. And I'll use the analogy of people going like, why is Zuckerberg deciding how schools should be taught in New Jersey? That's a different industry, but in our own, is Google going to tell us how to run our buildings? Does Google have the right knowledge to tell us how to run our buildings? Are we irrelevant as Google tells us how to run our buildings even? And they will stumble through it if they don't listen to the experience that's already been out there. But I mean, that's the Zuckerberg example. Is like, well, wait a second, just because he's rich doesn't mean he can tell school teachers in New Jersey how to run their schools. It just happens to be he has all the money and all the power. And we're really, that's my question.
But you've seen Google's digital buildings standard, right? Google's come out with the thing they call digital buildings, which is a competition with Haystack, Brick. You know, it's their own initiative, one more time, tag model thing. And if you're doing Google buildings, you better know about digital buildings because that's what they're telling you to do.
But they're not saying it's a competition, are they? I mean, it is probably, but.
They're not saying that, no.
Man,
we lost.
You know, I mentioned that I see things really generational, and you could equate that to the life cycle of anything, let's say. And if you think about how long you had your first telephone versus how long you keep your cell phone these days, and it opens up the opportunity for innovation and transformation. And part of the challenge in our industry is buildings were built to last for a very long time. But now, you know, as you guys know, I spend a lot of time in the fast food or the QSR world, And the life expectancy of a typical building as it sits without a major remodel is 5 to 7 years. That's it. Who, you know, when would we have ever thought the life cycle of a building would be 5 to 7 years?
Well, that new Parliament House building that was built in 1988 still has the original Honeywell Xl1000s running today.
Yeah.
I want to add on what Jim said on compelling. What we have is necessity. What makes it compelling is necessity, because we are getting the electricity from the grid, and demand, basically supply and demand, is making us compelling at the end of the day. And now the grid side is ever changing from distributed energy generation. We will be a lot more compelling, and we will have to talk to the system, to the grid, more and more.
That wouldn't be the case if renewable energy becomes so cheap that then that goes away. But that's probably a different conversation, and we're 2 minutes past the hour, and I think we need to bring it to a close. So thank you, Anno and Tracy
and Anto. Yeah.
And so next Monday is Labor Day, so we're going to be dark. So we shall see everybody in 2 weeks, and video of this will be up, let's say, by morning. And with that, let's call it a day and have a great Labor Day weekend next week. Bye-bye, all.
Thanks.
See you, Dave.
Bye.
Bye.